locked up for life at 18. How one teen's mistake landed him in solitary forever. The cell was no bigger than a bathroom. Cold concrete walls surrounded him, the air heavy with silence. The only sound was the distant clang of metal doors slamming somewhere down the hall. Ian Manuel sat on his narrow bed, knees pulled close to his chest, staring at the tiny slot in the steel door, the only view he had of the outside world. He had been here for years, and he was only in his 20s. But when he first came to this place, he was just a boy, barely 18. The lights never truly went out in solitary. Even when the prison said it was night, a dim bulb hummed above his head. It made it impossible to tell one day from the next. Ian had learned to count time by the echoes of the guards' footsteps, and the meals slid through the slot. Breakfast, lunch, dinner. 3 reminders that he was still alive. One evening, Ian pressed his hands against the rough wall and whispered, "I'm sorry." He said it over and over like a prayer, not because anyone could hear him, but because it was the only thing that made him feel human. Years ago, he had made one terrible mistake, a robbery gone wrong. He never fired a gun, but someone got hurt. He was just 13 when it happened. When the police caught him, he thought he'd be sent to juvenile detention. Instead, he was sentenced to life in prison. At 18, when most teenagers were graduating high school, he was locked behind bars, forever. And after a few fights and disciplinary actions, the guards decided he was too much trouble. They threw him into solitary confinement, alone, 23 hours a day. "Lock down," the guard shouted, and the steel door slammed shut. The echo shook the small cell, bouncing off the walls like thunder. Ian closed his eyes. He could feel his heart racing, the weight of the years pressing down on him. Some nights he screamed just to hear his own voice. Other nights he talked to the cockroaches crawling in the corner, the only living things he saw. He thought about his mother, about the streets of Tampa where he used to ride his bike, about the night everything changed. It was supposed to be a quick robbery, a stupid dare to prove himself to older boys. But when the woman screamed, everything spun out of control. Ian didn't even know how to process what had happened before police lights flashed, sirens blared, and his life was gone. The judge said, "Life in prison." Those words echoed in his head every night. Life, as if time itself had been stolen from him. Years passed. Ian tried to read books, write poetry, anything to stop his mind from breaking. But solitary confinement is not just punishment. It's a slow kind of death. Some men screamed until their voices gave out. Others stopped talking altogether. Ian was determined not to lose himself, but every day it got harder. One morning, he woke up to find blood on his pillow from grinding his teeth in his sleep. Another day, he woke up and couldn't remember what month it was. "Is this what forever feels like?" he whispered.
The guards barely spoke to him. They dropped his food tray through the slot and moved on. Sometimes they forgot. Hours passed before anyone realized they'd missed a meal. He didn't even have a clock, just the sound of his heartbeat. But even in that darkness, Ian still had something the system couldn't take: his words. He began to write letters, not to judges or politicians, but to the woman he had shot years earlier. Her name was Debbie Bagg. In the letter, he apologized, told her how sorry he was and how much he regretted that night. He didn't expect a reply. Weeks later, one came. Debbie wrote back. She told him she forgave him, that she believed he wasn't the same boy who hurt her. For the first time in years, Ian smiled. That one letter gave him something no guard, no warden, no prison wall could give: hope. But hope in prison can be dangerous. When word spread that Ian was writing to his victim, some guards mocked him. Other inmates called him soft. One day during routine checks, a guard ripped up one of Debbie's letters and tossed it in the trash. Ian stared through the bars, his hands shaking with anger. "You can't take that from me," he whispered. But in prison, they could take everything. He pressed his head against the cold metal door, tears rolling down his face. The sound of distant shouting echoed down the corridor, another inmate losing his mind in solitary. Ian wondered if he'd be next. Then one night, something happened that would change everything. The kind of moment that tests how much pain a person can really endure. The night the guards dragged him from his cell, Ian thought he was about to die. The hallway was dark except for the flicker of fluorescent lights above. "Hands behind your back," one of them barked, gripping his arm tighter than needed. He didn't resist. After years of solitary, resistance only made things worse. They led him down a row of echoing cells until they stopped at a door he'd never seen before. A tighter, smaller room they called the box. It was used for punishment inside punishment. No mattress, no toilet, just a drain in the floor. The smell of bleach and old sweat burned his nose. "What did I do?" Ian asked quietly. The guard didn't answer. He slammed the door and left. Hours passed, maybe days, it was impossible to tell. In that box there was no time, no sound, no sunlight. He tried to remember what day it was, but his thoughts drifted like fog. Hunger twisted in his stomach and his lips cracked from thirst. The isolation felt endless, pressing down on his chest until breathing hurt. He thought about the night of his crime again, how one wrong choice had chained him to this life. He was 13, hanging around older boys, trying to look tough. When one of them handed him a gun, it felt like power, but that power lasted only seconds. The gun went off during a robbery, and a woman screamed. She survived, but Ian's life ended right there on that street. Now in this cold box, he wished he could go back to that moment. He'd give anything to undo it. Anything. Suddenly, a noise broke the silence. Keys jingled outside the door. The slot opened and a hand shoved a paper bag through it. Inside was a sandwich, stale bread, a slice of cheese, and nothing else. "Eat up," a guard said with a smirk. Then silence again. Ian sank to the floor. The bread was dry, but it was food. He chewed slowly, thinking about Debbie, the woman he shot. Her forgiveness letter was gone now, torn by a guard, but her words lived in his head. "You're more than your worst mistake." That sentence became his lifeline. Weeks later, they moved him back to his original solitary cell. His body was thinner now, his mind heavier, but something had changed inside him. He began to write, on scraps of paper, on the back of old envelopes, even on the walls when there was nothing else. Poems, prayers, memories, anything to prove he still existed. "Dear world," he wrote, "I am still here."
His writing caught the attention of another inmate, an older man who passed notes through the cracks in the door. That man told Ian about a lawyer who was fighting for juvenile lifers across the country. Her name was Bryan Stevenson, the founder of the Equal Justice Initiative. For the first time, Ian felt a spark of hope. Maybe someone, somewhere, might hear his story. Maybe he wasn't forgotten. But prison doesn't like hope. It has a way of crushing it. One morning, the guards came again. This time, their faces were tense. "You been writing letters again?" one demanded. Ian froze. "They're poems," he said. The guard snatched the notebook from his hands, flipped through the pages, and laughed. "You think anyone cares about your poems, killer?" Then he threw the book into the trash can. Ian's heart sank. His hands trembled as he stared at the torn paper lying in the corner. For a moment, the silence felt heavier than ever. That night, he couldn't sleep. He lay awake staring at the faint light above him, replaying that guard's words. The next morning, he made a decision. He would not let them erase him. If he couldn't speak to the outside world, he would find another way. He began memorizing every poem he wrote, repeating each line in his head until it was burned into memory. Words became his escape. Each verse reminded him he still had power over something, even if it was only his mind. Years dragged by. Letters to the outside world was slow, but one finally made it through, to Bryan Stevenson's team. When they read Ian's story, they knew it was wrong. A boy sentenced to life at 13, left to rot in solitary. It broke every standard of justice. In 2010, after nearly 2 decades in isolation,
a new ruling came from the U.S. Supreme Court. Children could no longer be sentenced to life without parole for non-homicide crimes. For Ian, that ruling was a light breaking through years of darkness. He didn't know it yet, but his time in that cell was nearing an end. Still, the system didn't move fast. Paperwork, delays, red tape. Every day felt like another test of his sanity. But deep down, he held on to that fragile thread of hope that maybe one day he'd walk out and feel sunlight again. Until one morning, the warden himself appeared at his door. "Manuel," he said, flipping through a folder. "Pack up your things." Ian froze. His heart raced. "Why?" he asked. The warden gave a faint smile. "Looks like your freedom papers just came through." Ian's hands trembled as he grabbed the small pile of belongings. Letters, old photos, scraps of poems. The sound of the cell door unlocking was louder than thunder. After nearly 18 years in solitary, the door finally opened. But what waited for him outside that cell was not freedom. It was a world that had moved on without him. When the heavy prison doors opened, the sunlight hit Ian's face like fire. He squinted, covering his eyes with one hand. 18 years. That's how long it had been since he last saw the sky without bars cutting through it. The air felt strange, almost too fresh. The sound of birds, real birds, made his chest tighten. He stepped forward slowly, like a man walking on another planet. The world beyond the fence looked bigger, louder, faster. Cars zoomed by, people talked on phones, and the smell of fried food drifted from a nearby street. For a moment, he just stood there, frozen. A man from the Equal Justice Initiative placed a hand on his shoulder. "You're free now, Ian." Free. The word echoed in his mind, but freedom didn't feel the way he had imagined. Inside, time had stopped. Out here, it had raced ahead without him. Technology, music, even the way people dressed, everything had changed. He was 39 years old now, but part of him was still that scared 13-year-old boy. The first night out, he couldn't sleep. The bed was soft, too soft. Every sound outside, a door closing, a car alarm, footsteps, made his heart jump. Years of isolation had trained his body to expect danger in every sound. He lay there in the dark, whispering to himself, "You're not in the cell anymore. You're free." But it didn't feel real. The next morning, he looked in the mirror. The reflection staring back at him was a stranger, older, thinner, eyes carrying a lifetime of pain. He touched his face as if trying to remember who he used to be. Days turned into weeks. Ian tried to adjust. He joined programs that helped former inmates learn job skills and connect with mentors. But no one could teach him how to unlearn silence. In solitary, talking could get you punished. Out here, silence made people think something was wrong. Sometimes he walked through crowded streets just to remind himself he existed. People passed by without noticing him, and he wondered, did they know he'd spent half his life in a box the size of a closet? Did they know that one bad night at 13 had stolen everything from him? One afternoon, his phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but when he answered, the voice on the other end made him stop breathing. "Hello, Ian. It's Debbie." He froze. Debbie Bakery, the woman he shot all those years ago, the woman who forgave him.
"I heard you're out," she said gently. "I just wanted to tell you, I'm proud of you." Tears welled in Ian's eyes. He sat down on the edge of his bed, unable to speak. "Thank you," he finally whispered. "I wouldn't have made it without your forgiveness." That phone call reminded him that redemption was possible, even for someone like him. He started speaking publicly, telling his story to schools, prisons, and conferences. "I want people to know," he'd say, "that kids make mistakes, but they're not monsters. They deserve second chances." The world began to listen. His poetry, once written on scraps of paper in a dark cell, was now read on stages and published in books. Each word carried the voice of a boy who had survived what many couldn't. Still, some nights were hard. He'd wake up sweating, convinced he was back in solitary. The nightmares didn't end when the sentence did. But instead of hiding from them, Ian started to use them, turning his pain into purpose. He worked with justice reform groups to end solitary confinement for minors. His story appeared in documentaries and interviews, inspiring others to fight for change. Even as the memories haunted him, he found peace in knowing his voice could protect others from the same fate. One day, he returned to the prison that once held him, this time as a guest speaker. The guards, the cold air, the echo of metal doors, it all came rushing back. He walked through the same hallways where he once counted every step, every second. Inside the gym, dozens of young inmates sat waiting. Ian looked at their faces, some angry, some scared, some just lost. He took a deep breath and began. I was one of you once, 13 years old, thinking I knew everything. I made one mistake, and it cost me nearly my whole life. But I'm standing here today because someone believed I could change. And you can too. The room was silent. Some of the boys nodded, a few wiped tears from their eyes. When he left that day, Ian looked back at the gates closing behind him, the same gates that once locked him away. This time, he smiled. The prison didn't own him anymore. As the sun set, he whispered the same words he'd said to himself years ago in that cold, dark cell, but now with new meaning. I'm still here. Ian Manuel's story is one of the most powerful examples of survival and forgiveness in modern U.S. prison history. A boy sentenced to life at 13 spent 18 years in solitary confinement and came out not broken, but brave enough to fight for change. His journey reminds us that justice without mercy is just another kind of prison.